My name is Valentina. I am 46 years old, and I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in a neighborhood called San Telmo, where the streets are cobblestoned and the buildings are old and slightly exhausted looking. Beautiful in the way of things that have survived more than they were originally built for. I have lived in Munich, Germany for 19 years, long enough that I think in German sometimes and dream in Spanish always, long enough that Argentina feels like a country I carry inside me rather than a place I could simply go back to. I work as a translator, Spanish, German, English, and a functional Italian that I acquired the way you acquire a fourth language, by sheer proximity and stubbornness. I am telling you this because my work is about finding the words that carry meaning across borders. And this story is about discovering that the most important things the man I loved was saying to me, he was saying without words at all, and I did not understand them until after he was gone. My husband's name was Klaus. He died 14 months ago of a heart attack on a Thursday morning in October, at 53 years old, in the parking lot of the engineering firm where he had worked for 20 years. He was there early, as he always was. A colleague found him. I was at home drinking coffee and reading a brief I needed to translate by noon, and the phone rang, and nothing that came after has quite returned to the shape it had before. I need to go back to the beginning, to Buenos Aires in 2002, because the beginning is where the shape of everything was set. And it is also where I made the decision that brought me to Munich and to Klaus, and to the October morning that rearranged my life for the second time. In 2001 and 2002, Argentina collapsed. I mean this economically. The peso devalued. Savings disappeared overnight. The middle class fell through the floor it had been standing on, and millions of people who had been living ordinary lives found themselves in circumstances that made ordinary life unrecognizable. My family was not wealthy, but had been comfortable, and by the end of 2002, comfortable was gone. My father had owned a small printing business that could not survive the crisis. My mother was a school teacher whose salary became worth almost nothing. My younger sister Cecilia was 17 and needed things my parents could no longer provide. I was 27, with a degree in languages and some experience working at a translation agency, and I made the decision that many Argentines with European heritage made in those years, which was to look toward the passport that ancestry had given me and to use it. My grandmother was Italian. Through her, I held an Italian passport, and through the EU that passport opened Germany, and through a contact of a contact I had a lead on a translation firm in Munich that was looking for Spanish speakers. I left on a February morning, a morning so hot it was absurd, the Buenos Aires summer at its most relentless, and I hugged my mother at the airport and she held me tightly and said, "Come back when you can, and when you can't come back, send what you can." She said it practically, without sentimentality, because that was how she was, and because she understood that the situation required practicality above everything else. I arrived in Munich in a February that was the opposite of everything I had left. Dark, cold, orderly, quiet in a way that Buenos Aires had never been for a single hour of its existence. The translation firm hired me. I found a room in a shared apartment in Schwabing. I learned German with the focused desperation of someone who understands that the language is the difference between floating on the surface of a place and actually being inside it. I sent money home every month from the very first paycheck, because my mother had asked, and because I could, and because the alternative was to not send it, and I could not make myself do that. I met Klaus at a work event 18 months after I arrived. He was there as a client. His engineering firm used the translation agency for technical documents. He was tall and fair and spoke German in the slow, precise way of someone from Bavaria, which, at the time, I found both slightly daunting and oddly reassuring. He asked what I was working on. I told him. He asked how I had ended up in Munich. I told him a version of that story, the condensed professional version, and he listened with the quality of attention that I have since come to understand was entirely characteristic of him, the kind that made you feel the conversation was the only thing happening in the room. We met for coffee the following week, and the week after that. He was methodical and genuinely kind and curious about Argentina in a way that felt real rather than polite, asking about the geography and the food and the political history and the way the crisis had actually felt from the inside for real people, which most Europeans at that point understood only as an economic abstraction. I found myself talking about Buenos Aires more honestly with him than I had with almost anyone in Munich, where I had been performing a kind of competence and adaptability that left less room for the complicated feelings underneath it. We were together within the year. I moved into his apartment in a neighborhood called Bogenhausen, a quiet, leafy part of Munich that was the furthest imaginable thing from San Telmo, and I built a life there slowly and with genuine happiness in the way you build something that you discover, piece by piece, is more substantial than you thought it would be. Klaus was a steady person. He was not dramatic or effusive. He was German in the particular way that Germans are sometimes caricatured, but are more interestingly described, which is that his feelings ran deep and were expressed in action rather than declaration. He showed love by doing things, by noticing what needed to be done and doing it without being asked, without making it a statement, by being completely, reliably there. We married in 2007. A small ceremony, Munich civil office followed by dinner at a restaurant in the Englischer Garten where the food was good and the company was everyone we actually wanted there. My mother and Cecilia flew over for the first time either of them had been on an airplane, and I watched my mother navigate the Munich airport with the same practical composure she brought to everything, and I loved her for it so much I had to look away. Klaus's family received them with a warmth that was typically Bavarian, meaning reserved on the surface and genuine underneath. And my mother told me afterward that she liked him because she could see he was a man who meant what he did. We did not have children. This was a decision we made together, or rather a decision that we each made separately and then discovered we had made in the same direction, which felt like its own kind of confirmation. We had full lives. His work, my work, travel when we could, a wide circle of friends, the particular satisfaction of a partnership that had settled into itself without losing its interest. We were not complacent, but we were comfortable, which is different, and I think the difference matters. I sent money home every month for the entire 19 years. Not always the same amount. More when I could. Less during a difficult year in the translation market when I was freelancing and the work was unpredictable. Klaus knew I sent money and never questioned it, never made me feel that what was mine to give was subject to his approval. This was one of the things I loved about him. The money was something my family needed, and I had it and I sent it. and he understood this as simply part of the shape of our life, without requiring that it be negotiated or thanked. My mother and Cecilia came to Munich twice more over the years, and Klaus and I went to Buenos Aires 3 times. The visits were good, but always slightly dissonant, the way visits to a childhood place always are when you have been away long enough. I was a tourist in my own history, recognizable to the city but no longer quite fluent in it. Klaus was patient and interested on each visit, walking the neighborhoods, asking questions, eating everything. He and my mother got along in the way of people who cannot speak each other's language directly, but understand each other in some more fundamental register, through gesture and tone and the way they each looked at me. He died in October, on a Thursday, in a parking lot. The weeks after his death are something I can describe factually, but not, even now, emotionally, because the emotional reality of those weeks was not something that happened in a way that language can capture. It was more like weather, like being inside something that moved around you and through you, and that you survived without quite experiencing as survivable.